Between 1840 and the 1950s, poliomyelitis, better known as polio, was a worldwide epidemic. A disease whose main victims were children was ravaging not only the United States, but the entire world. For Thomas Clyde, he came face to face with this disease on the morning of his 8th birthday.
It was on July the 9th, 1941. I was at my grandmother's house in Aliquippa, and I woke up with a very bad sore throat, and my body was aching all over, and I was running a high fever, and so they put me to bed.
Not knowing much about the disease, doctors had thought Thomas had spinal meningitis. It wasn't until later that they diagnosed him with having polio.
And the other boy that got polio the same day I did, we were the first 2 reported cases in America that summer, and President Roosevelt put our names in the paper, and he got polio in his legs and never walked.
It wasn't until 1955 that Jonas Salk discovered a vaccine to eradicate the disease, 14 years after Thomas Clyde lost function of his right arm. But Thomas was always looking up.
I might have been an athlete, and God wanted me to be a pastor. And with my crippled arm, I've been able to help a lot of young people and people who have disabilities. It just made me trust in other people and trust in the Lord. It's been a real blessing to me.
For the first semester of his 3rd grade year, Thomas Clyde had to be homeschooled, returning to elementary school in January.
I always was a rascal, and my principal always used to say, Tommy, you could do better. And then she'd have me bend over and give me a spanking. And the day I got ordained, she came to the church and she said, see, Tommy, I told you you could do something good.
2 years after he got sick, Pastor Clyde broke his right arm in a big free-for-all with a bunch of other guys one spring night. The doctors wanted to amputate his arm, but his mother was adamant against it.
So I stuck a steel plate in there, and I was in what they called an airplane cast, and my arm got real stiff, and that made us go to Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, and we met Dr. Jesse Wright, who was in charge of the children with polio, and our main job was at the D.T. Watson home.
The D.T. Watson home was, and still is, the legacy of Mr. and Mrs. David Thompson Watson, and was the site where Jonas Salk decided to conduct his first trials of the polio vaccine. Thomas arrived at the home in the spring of 1943, where he lived until the day before Christmas, when he was allowed to return home to his family.
I consider myself lucky because I just lost my right arm, and I've seen other people, in the iron lungs. Without that, they would die because it helped them to breathe. Then right across there was the baby's ward, and that was kind of sad. They're bringing the babies completely paralyzed.
Although there was the constant reminder of having to live with polio and the suffering that went along with it, things weren't always bad at the home, and children were still able to be children.
Another boy and I, we used to sneak in the pantry down in the kitchen. We'd take the little boxes of marshmallows. Well, we stole those little boxes of marshmallows and bottles of root beer pop, and we'd take them clear up into the attic where nobody went, and we'd hide them there, and we'd go up there for our little snack.
Even with his positive outlook and acceptance of losing the use of an arm, it's still a hard thing, with the most painful of memories being kept in a photograph.
My sister and myself at my grandmother's house putting a letter in the mailbox for Santa Claus. And I always ask people, when you look at it, what's different? You know what's different?
What?
I'm putting the letter in the box with my right arm. So that has to mean I didn't have polio.
According to the Rotary's website, 350,000 people, mainly children, were affected by polio in 1985. Today, the number of people affected is the lowest it's been, with only 4 endemic countries: Afghanistan, India, Nigeria, and Pakistan. But it's organizations like the Rotary Foundation that are fighting to eradicate this disease so that one day it will be wiped completely off the map.